whenever there's trouble, G.I. Joe is there. G.I. Joe, American hero. G.I. Joe is there. It's G.I. Joe against Cobra and Destro, fighting to save the day. He never gives up, he's always there, fighting for freedom over land and air. G.I. Joe, American hero. G.I. Joe is there.
G.I. Joe is the code name for America's daring, highly trained Special Mission Force. Its purpose, to defend human freedom against Cobra, a ruthless terrorist organization determined to rule.
Now entering the truth zone, deep into the vortex of the information revolution, with your host, Michael B.
My name is Michael B., and this is The Truth Zone, coming to you live from North Dallas, Texas. And of course, today, we know that it is Memorial Day, so how predictable of me to discuss this topic. First, though, I do want to make a retraction. I did a show on the dangers of THC in marijuana, and that part I won't retract, but I'm going to retract that I am 100% in favor of decriminalizing and utilizing cannabis medicinally, and I was against recreational use only because of what THC does or can do to the developing brain. Should people under 25 be using it regularly? However, after discussing it with a couple of family members that know about not just the plant but common sense in general, if we regulate it like alcohol, make the age 21 or over, hopefully that would deter it getting into the hands of our children, which would get in the hands anyway, but we could also perhaps greatly minimize the black market, perhaps weaken the drug cartels that push marijuana. And of course, it is ridiculous that somebody getting caught with a couple of joints in their car for the third time go to jail for 10 years, whereas a man can rape a woman and get out in 2. So there's a problem there. So I want to retract my statement on not being in favor of legalizing it all the way across the board federally. So, Attorney General Sessions, lay off the war on drugs. At least take marijuana off the table. Go after the synthetics. Go after the pushers. Go after the meth lab people. That's great. Do it. But marijuana needs to be legalized and regulated and taxed just like alcohol. Make it federal and just move on with this crap and let just people enterprise freely. And if they want to grow it in their backyard, and if a state like Alaska wants to put in a law that says you can grow it in your backyard, but you can't sell it, great. Without a license or whatever, great. You want to grow it in your backyard, you want to smoke some weed, go for it. Great. So that's my retraction there. I also want to mention that those of you that have been listening every day have heard me talk about my personal issues. Well, my wife and I, we had some week last week, and we came to the realization how much we really love each other. And that's all that really counts, in the scheme of things. And we both admitted and confessed to each other that we could have done things differently together, and we're going to. And I love that woman more than I've ever loved anyone on this planet. And I'm very thankful that we were able to stop the possible ending of our relationship, which would have ruined my life, and I know that now. So, and I don't mean monetarily, I mean in my heart. So I'm very thankful that we both see in each other how much we love each other. And I'm a very blessed man to have her by my side. And due to my issues in life, I doubted her. And after this past week and how we reaffirmed how much we love each other, any doubt I ever had about her is gone. Absolutely done, gone, finished. And it's already made a great difference. And I'll tell you right now, if you can find a man or a woman like my Cheryl, you are definitely blessed. So I just want to do that. So I opened up the show with a real American hero, the G.I. Joe theme song. Now, you know, we call everyone that goes into the armed forces automatically a hero. They're a hero for defending our country. We're a hero for defending the world. They're a hero for keeping us free, right? The definition of hero is a person who is admired or idolized for courage, outstanding achievements, or noble qualities. Well, okay, so I guess it's fair to say that anyone who joins the military is automatically a hero. For me, I think anyone who is in the physical shape needed and passes all the minimum requirements can be in the armed forces. Does that make them a hero? Well, I think you have to do something heroic. I think you have to really face danger, right, with courage. So I don't know if every person is a hero. And I think the next question that we have to ask ourselves is, okay, well, would we really need all of these heroes if maybe our government didn't do certain things over the past several decades to get us in the position where we feel that we need such a large army? And I don't know. I don't know what the last count is, 192, 195 military bases all over the world. I don't know if all of those would have been necessary if it wasn't for some of the decisions that our military have made, especially since World War II, especially in the 20th century, really. I think that's something that we have to ponder. How responsible is the United States government and the military-industrial complex responsible for the landscape of our present world? Take communist China, for instance. Would China be communist today and such an economic threat and now such a military threat to our existence if it wasn't for the United States government? The book Brotherhood of Darkness by Dr. Stanley Monteith, Monteith, and you can purchase that on Amazon. This man spent decades researching this book. And of course, I have cross-referenced. I have looked at many, many different writings and documents. And Dr. Monteith, his work is credible. And I urge all of you, everything I tell you on this show, I am not going to say is 100% accurate. That's impossible. But what I can tell you is that everything that I say, every reference, you can go cross-check And I'm confident most of it is going to be true. And whatever ultimately may come out to not be true, there's some truth in it. That I will guarantee. So, I just want to read a couple of pages for you. Arthur Schlesinger Jr. revealed the little-known fact that both Winston Churchill and Harry Truman were dedicated to world government. Did Winston Churchill really want Great Britain to surrender its national sovereignty? Why did Harry Truman carry Lord Tennyson's poem in his wallet throughout his life? Is it possible that both men were members of the arcane societies? Most people have forgotten the strange things that happened during Harry Truman's presidency. First, he signed the United Nations Charter, knowing full well that the UN was designed to become the government of the world. Then he ceded control of Eastern Europe and China to the communists. And when the public began to question why he had betrayed hundreds of millions of people to a life of slavery, he plunged us into a no-win war in Asia, known as the Korean War. When General MacArthur told a congressman that he wasn't allowed to win the Korean War, President Truman relieved him of his command. If you study that era, you will discover that General Lin Pao, the communist leader who commanded the Chinese army that attacked our soldiers in North Korea, knew there was a secret agreement that precluded us, the United States military, from winning the Korean War. General Lin Pao wrote, "I would never have made the attack and risked my men and military reputation if I had not been assured that Washington would restrain General MacArthur from taking adequate retaliatory measures against my lines of supply and communication." At this point, I, Dr. Monteith, want to explain how Harry Truman brought communism to China. Most people believe that the nationalist Chinese lost the Civil War, but nothing could be further from the truth. General Chiang Kai-shek's armies were winning the Civil War until the American State Department placed an arms embargo on the nationalist forces, which prevented them from buying weapons or supplies anywhere in the world. Even the weapons they had previously purchased on Okinawa and other Pacific islands were blockaded. How can an army fight without weapons? It can't. Contrary to everything you have heard or read, our State Department intentionally brought Chairman Mao to power. To that very charge, I quote from a long-suppressed Senate report on the fall of China. Copies of the pages quoted are available to researchers. It's called Institute of Pacific Relations Report of the Committee on the Judiciary 82nd Congress 2nd Session, Senate Resolution 366, a resolution relating to the internal security of the United States. At the end of 1945, when General Marshall left for China, the balance of power was with the Chinese nationalists, and remained so until at least June 1946. Chiang's divisions were chasing the communists northward, and the prospect of victory by nationalist China was at its highest. However, when General Marshall arrived in China, he undertook to bring about the coalition government which his directive demanded. This plan failed when the coalition failed. When the Chinese government did not affect coalition by the summer of 46, United States military assistance to China was brought to an end. Not only did the United States stop sending military supplies to the Chinese government, the shipment of war materials actually purchased by the Chinese also was halted. The Chinese also had purchased surplus equipment that remained on Okinawa and other Pacific islands. Even the shipment of this was banned. A complete embargo took effect in the summer of 46. It was maintained at least until May 1947. General Chennault testified that the first shipment arrived in Shanghai in December of 48. Chennault further stated that the war material sent to China after the embargo did not arrive in time to aid the Chinese nationalists in the field. Admiral Cook testified that the Chinese had a number of divisions equipped with American arms. When the flow of American ammunition was stopped, these divisions lost their firepower and were defeated. Even after the 80th Congress appropriated $125 million for aid to the Chinese, shipments were delayed, and when the guns finally arrived, the Chinese general in North Korea, they were without bolts and therefore useless. So, ladies and gentlemen, the United States government under Harry S. Truman created Communist China. Then you fast forward to the 90s, it was William Jefferson Clinton, president at the time, that sold the Chinese our military technology to get them up to speed. So, would we need these great American heroes today, whose suicide rate is something like, I don't know, was it 25 a day? And what they suffer through post-traumatic syndrome and loss of limbs? Would we really need such a vast military if it wasn't for decisions like that? And you take the Middle East. Great Britain built most of that landscape. In the 20th century, Lawrence of Arabia was British. He created Saudi Arabia. Most of the wealth generated was through the oil companies set up by Britain and America. Prescott Bush, yes, father of Bush 41, made a fortune. That man was an imperialist communist as well. So, should we be encouraging our children to join the military? And isn't it time that we stop romanticizing the U.S. military and stop calling everyone a hero? President Eisenhower, and I'm sure most of you have heard this clip of how he warned against the military-industrial complex. Well, I think today is very apropos that it gets played again. And I think that if you have teenage children with aspirations of joining the military, perhaps you would want to sit down with him or her, listen to this clip, get that book, Brotherhood of Darkness by Dr. Stanley Manteith, and then really make an educated decision on, should we continue to romanticize G.I. Joe?
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
Good evening, my fellow Americans. We now stand 10 years past the midpoint of a century that has witnessed 4 major wars among great nations. Until the latest of our world conflicts, the United States had no armaments industry. American makers of plowshares could, with time and as required, make swords as well. But we can no longer risk emergency improvisation of national defense. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. Added to this, 3.5 million men and women are directly engaged in the defense establishment. Now, this conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We recognize the imperative need for this development, yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. Our toil, resources, and livelihood are all involved. So is the very structure of our society. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals, so that security and liberty may prosper together.
So, can anyone deny what President Eisenhower said? A state of perpetual war. You know, a lot of people like to talk about the fact that Barack Obama was the first president to be in a state of war for his full 8 years as president. Well, I have a news flash for you. Unless we drastically change our philosophy about world domination and imperialism, and if Donald Trump is reelected in 2020, he too will have a full 8 years of war. And the next president after him, and the next president after him, and so on and so forth, until we change our philosophy. Until we as a people demand a sharp reduction in these foreign military bases. Or when we are foreigners, we are an invading, occupying force in other countries. That's how they feel. And would we not feel that way? Let's say if the Chinese army came into Montana and created a Chinese base in the woods or the mountains, what have you. Wouldn't we feel the same way? And by the way, I spoke about this last week. We have Muslims that have created little Islamaburgs all over the country, several in Texas, and we seem to be okay with that. Why are we okay with that? We shouldn't be okay with that. But because it's not really talked about much, and it's not really concentrated about, we seem to ignore it because it's not right in our faces. But if they put up big flags and they walked around in uniforms everywhere, we wouldn't like it, the way other countries don't like us, sitting on their lands, and you can't blame them. Now, I am not agreeing with the argument that we have this problem with fundamental, I'm not saying the word radical, because they're fundamental. I am not saying that we have the problem of terrorism because we, America, invaded their countries. No, their ideology doesn't like anyone else but themselves. And they don't even like themselves unless you live to the tight letter of the Quran and other writings. That's a separate issue than the fact that Britain, America, and Saudi Arabia are the main financiers of Islamic terrorism. Yeah, that's the truth. Those three entities created ISIS, created Al-Qaeda, created the Mujahideen, or however you say it, because it's not right in front of me. That they have been financed through Britain, America, and Saudi Arabia primarily. That's just the way it is. We've supplied them with intelligence, training, weapons, technology. That's just the way it is. We've allowed them to take oil and turn that into cash. We've allowed it, folks. We've created it. And it seems to me that we get very excited when Trump talks about strengthening our military and adding more spending. We seem to get excited. Now, I agree that the situation that we're in, we're gonna have to have some sort of abroad fighting with ISIS, and I do agree that our soldiers need the best weapons. They need the best medical care. I mean, I agree to all of that. However, the fight is really at home. It's our philosophy and acceptance of this multiculturalism garbage. I have read off the daily terrorist report on fundamental jihad every single day around the world. Do you notice how I never talk about Japan? Do you notice Japan never comes up? Why do you think that is? I could tell you why that is. They're not openly accepting. They're just not openly accepting folks of Islam. And that is our problem. The fight is home. The fight is here. The fight is not 3,000 miles away. You can blow up 1,000 people a day. Blow them up at will. The problem is within. The problem is our philosophy, accepting an aberrant culture that will not assimilate. Oh, they'll pretend to assimilate when the numbers are small. But as they get bigger, they become more and more resistant to our culture. And we're seeing this in countries that have 60-70% Muslims in their population. And so I just want to roll off the last couple of days. Yesterday there were 2 instances. One in the Philippines and one in Iraq. And these guys have it almost daily. In the Philippines, 8 were killed. 8 employees at a rice mill are murdered by jihadists for having betrayed their faith. And believe me, ladies and gentlemen, it doesn't take much in the eyes of these fundamental, orthodox, strict, extreme letter of the law Muslims. It doesn't take a lot to betray the faith, so it doesn't take a lot to get the penalty of death. Mosul, Iraq, 12 were killed. Caliphate members fired to a hospital. They set fire to a hospital and execute a dozen young people inside. The 27th, Philippines again, 19 were killed. 3 women and a child are among 19 civilians found slain by Islamic extremists near a university. Also on the 27th, Afghanistan, 18 killed, 6 injured. A Shaheed suicide car bomber slaughters 18 at a public bus station. On the 26th, Egypt, 29 killed, 23 injured. That's a Manchester massacre right there, folks. But you really don't hear much about it. Oh, wait, you did. This was the Coptic Christian one. Christians on their way to a monastery make easy pickings for Islamic gunmen who massacre 28, including 10 children. You see, it's what we accept. That's the problem. And while we continue to glorify G.I. Joe and G.I. Jane, we're just asking for more war. As we romanticize the army, we're asking for more of it. And yet we cry and lament, we weep and wail when our soldiers are killed, when our children come home in boxes, or half the person literally they were before. But then we aggrandize all of this. And we really have to ask ourselves why. Why do we enjoy this cycle of pride and glory and honor and victory, and then we weep and wail in blood, guts, suffering, and failure? Why do we continue, ladies and gentlemen? So, forgive me for being on board. I am not going to glorify today. I'm not going to put an American flag on my front yard. I'm not going to put a POW sign in my window. I'm not going to tie a yellow ribbon around one of my trees. What I am going to do is I'm going to lament a little bit about how far we have allowed very evil people to take our family members and have them killed, maimed, and crippled. I'm going to think about that today. And I'm going to give thanks to my Lord Jesus Christ for making me despise violence and doing injury to my fellow man so much that outside of brute self-defense of my property, I could never hurt another human being. And I'm very thankful that my children decided not to join the military, and now they're grown and really too old for a draft, if God forbid there was a draft. I'm thankful to my Lord that they are spared such a thing, and that they've been spared these endless tours in the Middle East in an endless war, unless we, the American people, demand a change of philosophy and go back to the founding fathers. You keep your interior strong. You promote the American culture of freedom and enterprise, liberty, religious expression, but not to the point where it threatens the sanctity of our society and human life like Islam does. Our founding fathers never would have allowed it. Thomas Jefferson had a very bad experience with Barbary Coast pirates, and he got a rude awakening. A rude awakening to Islam. They never would have allowed it. They would have been like Japan. Japan doesn't have terrorism from Muslims. Therefore, they don't need to join a coalition and go fighting 3,000 miles away in the desert. They don't have to, because they didn't get involved. We need a change of mindset. And I am just concerned that President Trump's foreign policy smells of globalism and imperialism and continuing involvement and encroachment after encroachment. Regime change. Not a good idea. Our founding fathers believed in not having a standing army unless directly threatened. And if a fire was to be shot at another country, war had to be declared and approved by Congress. None of these 3 a.m. shots that is just ordered by the generals didn't exist when this country was a true constitutional republic and not part of this global imperial force that all it's doing is sucking up our incomes our exchange of our time for dollars so that we can live, an exchange of property for the ever advancement of the military industrial complex. It has to end. And only we the people can make that end when we change our mindset and go back to who we were once. I like the saying, sometimes you have to take 2 steps back to go 3 steps ahead. All we're doing in the name of progress and moving forward is actually going backwards. The globalists, including our military-industrial complex, are trying to go all the way back to the days of Nimrod and the Tower of Babel, when the leaders back then sought a one-world government, sought to rule over everyone under one dichotomy, one language, one rule, one culture. America stands for individual freedom. Americans should be Americans. French should be French. British should be British. And so on and so forth. Through that kind of national diversity, not multiculturalism and tribalism within the country, but national individuality is the key to true peace, to true acceptance, to true prosperity. This other way just isn't working. So I just think it's time. It's time for us to stop glorifying, praising, and looking at every single Memorial Day with glassy eyes and starry-eyed romance and victory songs and chest pumping. It has led to nothing but disaster. So, I wanted to share that with you. I have 7 minutes left, and I just want to get into a little bit about James Comey, because that man right now, he's got to be the first to fall. I know most of us want Hillary Clinton to go down. We want Barack Obama to go down, and they should go down in time. They must be wearing an orange jumpsuit. Attorney General Sessions has to make that happen. If he doesn't, I believe that's going to really, really send a message to all of us that, yeah, man, it is their club. And they look out for each other no matter what the other person does. And you and I just ain't in it. So, Comey has to be the first to go. So, coming from GodfatherPolitics.com, written by, again, Kelly Sharp, coincidence. Comey's brother worked for a firm that does the Clinton Foundation taxes. Now, she doesn't really believe in coincidences. No wonder former FBI Director James Comey wouldn't prosecute Hillary Clinton, which really, again, isn't it the Attorney General that makes that call to prosecute? I thought the Director of the FBI leads the investigation, right? Then turns it over to the Attorney General. Wouldn't the Attorney General then write up the indictment and get warrants and what have you, and doesn't a judge sign off on that or does the judge just sign off on like retrieving evidence and whatnot? And does the attorney general just straight up draw up the indictment, and then a marshal or whoever serves, and you get the process? But in this article, they want to say that Comey was responsible for prosecuting or not prosecuting. So, for one, he was probably scared for his life, which makes sense, like Seth Rich, since everyone around the Clintons seems to drop like flies. But for two, his brother works for the firm that processes the Clinton Foundation's taxes. This would explain why he seemed to be holding back from doing his job. Perhaps Comey was threatened that his brother would be exposed or sent to prison? What dirty laundry is hiding in the closet? And I can tell you right now, there is a hell of a lot of dirty laundry. Believe me, it stinks. Peter Comey works at the Washington law firm DLA Piper, serving as Senior Director of Real Estate Operations for the Americas. Shortly before the election, Kelly's source called up DLA's Piper's offices in Chinatown and confirmed that the law firm immediately patches callers through to Peter Comey's direct line there. DLA Piper is one of Hillary Clinton's top 10 all-time career campaign donors. Gee, what a shock. DLA Piper also does the Clinton Foundation's taxes. That's right. In fact, when the Clinton Foundation scandal broke, it was DLA Piper that performed the 2015 audit on the foundation, which was supposed to be an independent audit for the appearance of propriety. Now, how can they possibly have been independent and objective? Well, you know the answer to that. They couldn't be, they're not, and they never were. Property records show that James Comey owns the mortgage on his brother Peter Comey's house in Virginia. Therefore, James Comey had a direct financial relationship with a DLA Piper executive at the time he was investigating Clinton. So, talk about conflict of interest? You want to bring up BS charges on Donald Trump, who, as a private citizen, did business all over the world. But yet, you have an FBI director actively engaging in a criminal investigation while his brother works on the taxes for the Clinton Foundation, and in which James Comey owns the mortgage on his brother's house. Seriously? And I don't hear the left being up in arms about that. Yeah, because the liberal left are low information individuals. They don't know this stuff. And that's really what these people at the head, the Clintons, the Obamas, the Bill Gates, the Schmuckerbergs, the Grubers, they rely on your lack of knowledge, you liberals. They rely on your ignorance to pass their agendas. That's just the truth. I wonder if you people knew all of this, would you really tolerate it? These relationships, though egregious, are symptomatic of the brazen culture of crony capitalism that exists in our nation's capital. The public usually is prevented from learning these kinds of things, right? With the mainstream media blocking information from coming out. Sunlight, yes, sunlight, as in knowledge, is the only remedy. Correct. Knowledge, making yourself consciously aware of what's going on in our world, looking at the information yourself, and then coming to grips with your cognitive dissonance. And I know it'll be painful. Mine was painful too regarding 9/11. I didn't want to believe. I fought my friend. I fought him. His father and I would laugh at him, call him a nut, call him crazy, but he didn't give up. And finally, I acquiesced and I said, "Okay, John, I'll look at it. I'll look at the stuff you have. Fine." And I did. And then I decided to, okay, I'm going to disprove this crap. Well, I couldn't. And then I started doing internet radio. And I talked to a pilot who has become a good friend of mine over the internet now. His handle goes by the One Angry Jew. I'm not going to tell you his real name. That's not my business. And my eyes were opened. And I had to accept the fact that, gee, this government are not made of noble men and women. That they do not have my best interests at heart. That actually, they have their own and at my detriment, and they don't care. Knowledge is power, folks. Take that red pill. My name is Michael B. This is the Truth Zone. See you tomorrow at 10 a.m. And if your child is coming home from the military and they're home today, give him or her lots of hugs and kisses and enjoy your barbecue. See you tomorrow, folks.